Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Traces of Sleepy Faces, bedtime stories for grown-ups. It's chapter 4, and once again we're reading from the Tom Reynolds book, I Hate Myself and Want to Die. The 52 most depressing songs you've ever heard. Today we're winding the clock back to the year that I was born, 1969. With this fabulous song by The Doors, The End. I forgot how long it takes for it to warm up. Don't worry. For those of you who are thinking about singing along, I'll play it in its entirety. Oh, wow, entirety. I was going to say all of 11 minutes and 45 seconds of it. There's got to be a shorter version. Yeah, I found a 6-minute version. Like, that's an improvement. Anyway, I will play the song in its entirety at the end for those of you who'd like to sing along. But for now, let's talk about The End by The Doors and why it's one of the 52 most depressing songs you've ever heard. The Doors' place in music history lies primarily with their being the only major rock group whose lead singer was from another planet. I don't mean that in a cosmic interstellar way. I'm talking about a sci-fi B-movie with cheesy special effects, the kind of flick where you can visibly see the nylon strings on the jaw of giant Martian robots. For years, those grainy Doors concert films featuring a skulking, entranced Jim Morrison were considered visual records of the poet shaman in full sermon. Today, there's something creaky about them, with Morrison coming off as a hippie Godzilla, tromping around like he's destroying Tokyo, with the stoned audience standing in for a wide-eyed Japanese populace. But since he lucked out by dying before he could grow old and fat, Morrison's mad dog persona has grown beyond the sum of its rabid parts and bequeathed him a mythical status that supersedes who he really was, a wasted, obnoxious freak. Settle down, everybody. The End is The Doors' infamous magnum opus, which creeped out a new generation of listeners who heard it on the soundtrack of Francis Ford Coppola's bizarre Apocalypse Now. The song appears on the group's eponymous 1967 debut album, a stereo release with the instruments so separated it sounds like it was mixed according to a tidal chart. High tide, right channel, low tide, left channel. More than a few pints of ink have been spilled by critics analysing The End, particularly the jabbering murder story that Morrison unleashes in the song's middle when he recorded it so long ago. The recorded version pales next to the notorious Oedipal live version. But misty-eyed 1960s fans be damned. I'm calling this droning one-chord hypnofest for what it is, a druggy epic horror. The song. The best way to examine The End is via step-by-step instructions on reproducing it the way the Doors did inside the Whiskey A Go-Go 40 years ago. All you need is a D minor chord and a lead singer who's loaded up on LSD. Guitarists, tune your low sixth string down a full step, E to D, and fret a first position D minor chord, the same one REM used to build their career with. Play around with it, but don't forget to add the C sharp on the second string for that ragged-hinged harmonic minor sound. You've now written 85% of this song. Since this is your music, you, the guitarist, must include some lyrics. You have some verses you wrote about the end of a relationship. This is the end, beautiful friend, the end. This is the end, my only friend, The end. This is the extent of the lyrics you wrote. Give them to your lead singer. Keep in mind you just met him 6 months earlier and haven't decided whether he's a genius or an axe murderer. It's called the end. It's called the end, you tell him, handing him a lyric sheet. Who let all these bats in here? He mumbles, waving his hand above his head. You, the drummer, and the egghead keyboardist who brought this maniac into the group will start playing around with the D minor chord. The result should be an eerie, droning vamp, music you'd listen to while changing religions. Next, book yourself at the Whiskey A Go-Go on LA's fabulous Sunset Strip. It's a go-go club. It must be because it has the word go-go on the marquee. Go on stage with your one-chord song and begin playing it. Silently hope What's-His-Face has some more lyrics. Come on, you're the big poet, you think. This is the end, he sings in a Summer of Love croon, while gazing off with the same dazed expression a spaniel has after licking its balls. Just going to have a sip of my tea. Settle down, everyone. Suddenly, he'll respond to some subconscious cue, mournfully wailing about what will be so limitless and free. References to strangers' hands and a desperate land spew forth. Wow, you'll think, that's pretty deep. I don't know what it means, but hey, we've worked in another chord. As the crowd watches your singer chew on the linoleum, you'll feel inspired. Explore all the dark crevices of your D minor chord. No, there's about 4. Well, 6 if you take enough drugs. Learn to love D minor. It's the only chord you'll be playing for the next 3 hours. Your Hindu music should grow and expand until it sounds like Vishnu starting a war over curry. Have your singer climb further up the free association ladder until he's up where geese fly. All the children are insane, he moans, grabbing the microphone in a chicken's strangling grip. The crowd will look at him the way people do when they see a UFO. The blue bus is calling us. Feel relieved that this is still the 1960s. Now a moment happens that nobody anticipated, including you. Your singer will go into a trance and begins babbling, "The killer awoke before dawn. He put his shoes on." Okay, what the hell is this, you'll think, taking 2 steps back. The crowd will also take 2 steps back. Cops patrolling the strip outside will change lanes. Your singer tells a rambling story about a killer walking around his house and visiting his sister's room, then his brothers to do God knows what, before loudly bellowing, "Then he walked on down the hall." By now the crowd should be crawling under the tables to take cover. Your singer will be building to the climax of his tale, where the killer enters his parents' bedroom. He'll shriek an expletive at the top of his lungs, which implies having carnal relationships with mum. Watch the blood drain out of the club manager's face. Watch the crowd do a mass duck and cover. Watch your singer turn into a gecko. Panicking, you bash away hard on your D minor chord until your guitar feeds back. "Kill, kill, kill, kill," your singer chants. After you hit a crescendo normally reserved for cannon barrages, bring the music back down to its pianissimo level. Repeat the opening verses about how this is the end. Trust me, the audience will believe it. The song should end quietly while your singer swigs from a pint of rubbing alcohol. Have the club's manager storm up and tell you that you're fired. 3 months later, become rock and roll stars. Why it's depressing. Listening to the end is like staring at a whale-sized ink blot. People may have different reactions about what it means, but they'll all agree there's an awful lot of black space. It's one of those songs that always sounds longer than it actually is. Perhaps that's the intent, since drug trips are perpetual experiences that don't punch a time clock. It wasn't unusual for bands of the Doors era to pick a single chord and go wandering around the cosmos, but the end dollops on so much dark imagery that even your CD player gets winded playing it. CD player. This book is Quite old, by the way. One of Jim Morrison's biggest talents was his innate ability to make everything he coughed up extemporaneously seem profound. Sorry, I'll read that again. One of Jim Morrison's biggest talents was his innate ability to make everything he coughed up extemporaneously seem profound. Yet he had a way with words, as the saying goes. But when it came to linking thoughts together, Morrison's attention span went elsewhere. Trends in modern art help excuse most of the Lizard King's lapses, using buzzwords like imagist and non-linear to rationalise the ramblings of an otherwise intelligent guy who spent the last 7 years of his life whacked out of his mind. It doesn't help that Coppola used the end to bookend Apocalypse Now. Does anybody really want their song associated with napalm and a tubby Marlon Brando? Though the end had nothing to do with Vietnam, the song is strongly associated with the most depressing war film ever made, as well as bad acid trips, patricide, desolated landscapes, and one-chord songs that last an eternity. For those who've never heard it, you should listen to the end once. It won't kill you, but you may not be able to resist the urge to scream for somebody to change chords, for Christ's sakes. Have fun. And for those of you who haven't heard it before, and for those of you who have, here it is, all 6 minutes and 28 seconds of The Doors, the end.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. The end of our elaborate plans. The end of everything that stands. The end. No safety or surprise, the end. I'll never look into your eyes again. Can you picture what will be? So little madness and free. Desperately in need of some stranger's hand in a desperate land. Lost in a romance, wilderness of pain. and all the children are insane. All the children are insane.
I feel sullied and unusual after listening to that. I need a Bex and a nice lie down. Sweet dreams, everybody.